now from Nashville, Tennessee, it's time for another episode of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow, where all things related to your safety and security are discussed, detailed, and delivered to you. You may leave with a tip that saves you money or a tactic that saves your life. So here are your hosts, owner and founder of Defend Systems, Brink Fidler, and owner and operator of Herring Technology, Tom Herring.
Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow. I'm your co-host, Brink Fidler, owner and founder of Defend Systems. With me as always is my co-host and founder of this podcast, owner and operator of Herring Technology, Tom Herring. In these extremely challenging times with the COVID-19 pandemic across the world, we are again broadcasting via Zoom. And our show topic today, we're going to discuss martial law. It tends to be on the top, I should say, of a lot of people's minds, considering things that are going on across the country. And so we decided to take a look at that and help educate people on kind of what is lawful, what can be expected. Quick sidebar, neither Tom nor I are a legal expert or an attorney, but I am prior law enforcement, and we've been doing a little bit of research on this to just kind of help advise you all on what to expect. So, Tom, I'm going to start by asking you, what is your perception of what martial law actually is?
Well, I'll be honest, prior to, really diving into this and us taking a look at it, my idea of martial law was basically, the military takes over everything, and it's basically imprisons all civilians and to a degree, and without looking at it or ever thinking about it. And, since studying it, I've realized that, there's really two types of martial law out there. You have the qualified, and then you have, just what is true absolute martial law. So with that, there's a lot of confusion that's out there, and doing the research on it to what people think and their interpretations of it are.
Yeah, of course. The biggest concern is for most people, what I'm hearing from friends and social media and things like that is here's the concern, right? That suddenly there's going to be military in the streets. Nobody's going to be able to leave their home, and if you do, then you're going to be dealt with by the military. First of all, I don't believe this administration has any intent whatsoever to enact martial law. The administration and the COVID-19 task force has been given a lot of leeway and guidance to governors to run their own state, right? And that's where this tends to be a little bit of a sticky subject, right? But where people are beginning to wonder, can my mayor, can my governor, sign these executive orders and enforce them? Can they, if they conduct a stay-at-home order, executive order, say in the city of Nashville, where we are, can you be arrested for violating that order? Well, the short answer is yes. In times like these, that there is very clear constitutional authority given to states and leadership to enact executive orders and things like that in order to protect the greater good. There's actually a Supreme Court case on it from the early 1900s where a guy was forcefully vaccinated, or he refused to be vaccinated, and they arrested him. And it went to the Supreme Court. And in a Supreme Court ruling, a 7-2 ruling, the Supreme Court ruled that although, yes, there are very obvious and clear liberties that we all are granted by the Constitution during epidemics and pandemics and things like that, it is absolutely lawful to temporarily suspend some of those liberties in order to keep the public welfare, if you will, healthy. And so that's where some confusion is. People keep saying, well, you can't, and don't tread on me, and you can't, restrict my constitutional right to move about and things like that. And in normal times, that's true. But during an epidemic or a pandemic, the Supreme Court has been clear on that, again, over 100 years ago, why some of those liberties have to be sacrificed. you and I are both, Second Amendment supporters, right? Obviously, I'm prior law enforcement. We both hunt, so we're big on constitutional law and Fourth Amendment and civil liberty. However, during times like these, it takes, a village, if you will, to step up and, not violate those executive orders. But inevitably, there are going to be people that do it just to do it, right? It's like putting the sign up that says, do not touch this, right? What happens when you do that at your office, Tom?
Everybody wants to see what that is, and the first thing they do is touch it to see what happens.
That's right. Don't open this door. And what are the first thing they do? They'll freaking open the door. That's how people are. So there's going to be people that push the envelope, just like that guy, I can't even remember his name, and I wouldn't say his name to do him justice anyway, that likes to walk around downtown Nashville with a AR pistol or AK-47 pistol strung across his chest just to push the envelope. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so I think in these times, we're going to run into the same thing. People are going to take issue with being told that some of their civil liberties are suspended. And I understand. I get it. It's not comfortable for me either. But again, when we're talking about the greater good and it being temporary, then these leaders are absolutely within their constitutional right to do so, whether you like it or not.
Well, I always like to say it goes back to moderation, and that's something that we lack in our society any longer as a whole. And it's, I really don't think that's true. I think the greater population probably lives in that moderate level. But what we hear about every day and are inundated with is the opposite ends of the extreme. One leader once said that there's no place in a fanatic's mind where reason can enter.
That's very true.
That was a little Napoleon man that said that, but it is true. And it's just like you said, the one that wants to push it for his rights is there. There's no room for reason to enter on that side. Just like at the other, government's coming to take over, and that's where we end up fighting battles, and that's not where we all stand.
Sure, and I think most people are, like you said, reasonable. I looked this up, and just to give full credit, this is on heritage.org. Their senior legal fellow is a guy named, let me get his name right, Cully Stimson, and he wrote this article a few days ago. It's a great article on heritage.org about constitutional powers during an emergency. And to quote from his article, he said the Constitution, this is from Justice John Marshall Harlan. He wrote for the majority in that 7-2 majority in that Supreme Court case I told you about. It was in 1905, Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And he said the Constitution does not import an absolute right in each person to be at all times and in all circumstances wholly freed from restraint. Instead, a community has the right to protect itself against an epidemic. Its members may at times, under the pressure of great dangers, be subjected to such restraint to be enforced by reasonable regulations as the safety of the general public may demand. So there you go. I mean, the Supreme Court was pretty clear, but again, it needs to be reasonable. I mean, I'm sure there are probably horror stories out there in smaller jurisdictions of, I mean, look, I'm retired law enforcement. I love cops, but we've all had a bad experience with a cop, right? Everybody remembers the bad experience with a cop. So I can guarantee you there's somebody out there in this country that, based on these executive orders or whatever, has had some sort of negative experience with law enforcement. And I get that. Trust me when I say they're up against a heck of a job already. And then you put this on top of it where they're not getting, they can't go stay home and stay away from the general public, right? They have to be exposed to people all day, every day. And so they're under a lot of stress. And here in Middle Tennessee, right before this happened, we had the tornadoes, right? So they were working 12-hour shifts with no days off. So by all means, cut them some slack if you can, right? I mean, and we all can, right?
Yeah.
Because they're up against a heck of a time, but they're not going to be in Middle Tennessee anyway. They're not going to be out in the streets tossing you in paddy wagons if you're going to the grocery store. Just be reasonable about it, right?
Yeah, well, they're not going to toss you in the paddy wagon just for being out there and going. But if you're out there causing a commotion and causing a riot, not being reasonable and telling them that they're a bunch of commies for doing it and all of that, yeah, you're probably going to get your butt thrown in there. And to just bring rest back to the situation. Let's look at the history of it. Even when I look back at that, researching martial law, how many times has it been enacted, in the United States? There's a lot of opinions on that as well. What I see is there's been times when it's been by the state, in times of, the Chicago fire, Hawaii during the war there and the attack on Pearl Harbor. As far as a national, true, what I would call absolute martial law, when I said about the two types, the qualified and the absolute, the state regulations in those was more of a qualified time of martial law, meaning the National Guard came in, the military came in to assist law enforcement. They didn't take over, they came in to assist in those specific instances. The ones that you would say is absolute would go all the way back to during the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln. And basically, he suspended habeas corpus, so you lost all your rights then. You were now being tried there on site by a military group. You didn't have the right to a fair trial. So that's where we go back to. And then even after that, there were, more laws put into place to help protect against that. Hayes enacted that to make sure that it was not just something someone could declare. And that's what I see on it if you get down to the actual legal terms of martial law. But that's my opinion of what I've read. What have you seen? Because there's everything on the internet.
Well, sure, but like you said, true martial law has not been enacted since the Civil War, right? By the federal government, where the military controls everything, right? It's more of a state issue, like you brought up before. I mean, how often do you hear that a governor anywhere calls in the National Guard for disaster assistance, right? It's happened with tornadoes, it's happened with flooding, it's happened, you name it, with earthquakes, all sorts of natural disasters. And so again, most of the time it is simply the military, i.e. the state National Guard, who is called in to assist law enforcement, not replace law enforcement, not take over for them, not dictate what law enforcement does. So again, I remember when the tornado blew through the part of the world where I live, and I wasn't living there at the time, and I tried to drive out there, and they had a National Guardsman in the road, checking to make sure you weren't just a looky-loo driving through. So, okay, great. I mean, he's just helping supplement law enforcement, who was so busy at the time, right? So imagine being law enforcement right now, when you, I don't have any statistics on this, but I guarantee you that the domestic, what we call a 1041, the domestic disturbance calls have gone through the roof since everybody's stuck at home with each other.
Yeah, everyone's testing those vows, that's for sure, for better or for worse. You're finding out what each is like. So
that's right.
And Brink, it's a lot of people say we're already under martial law, depending on their interpretation of what's going on. You've got two Navy ships that are coming in, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, to provide aid. You've got National Guard already in certain areas, helping patrol areas. Is that martial law? Is it not martial law? What do you think on that? And if it is enacted, what do you see happening with our population? Are we talking about the radical population, the moderate population? What do you see?
Well, I think it depends on the state and the area, right? I think that's how it's going to. I think there's no chance in hell that there's going to be federal martial law enacted. To date, we've just not seen that. We've not seen this administration trying to make decisions for states. They've been supplementing states and supporting them and letting the governors kind of run their own ship, thank God. At a state level, could we see partial martial law enacted? Absolutely. Sure, you could. Now, are they going to call it that? I mean, Probably not. I mean, if you start talking about martial law, man, people start freaking out, right? So I don't think, for example, in Tennessee, our governor, Governor Lee, I don't think he's going to get on there and declare martial law. He may call on the National Guard. He may have already done that. I don't know. He's doing a fantastic job leading our state through this. I can tell you that. And he's going to call on whatever resources he needs. And if that means the National Guard, then that means the National Guard. What can we as citizens expect if that happens? Nothing different. I mean, you may see National Guardsmen out helping, right, doing certain things, but are they going to be running around with tanks and ARs? And no, I mean, they're most of the time they get called in to assist with this kind of stuff. They may be visible, but again, they're not going to be out marching in the street and throwing people in paddy wagons and all that kind of stuff. And I know there, like you said, if you want it, it's on the internet, you know, and trust me, everything on the internet is true, right? I mean,
absolutely,
as they say, but that's just not the case. I mean, I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, you know, dealing with the flood in 2010 when I was still with the police department, and Nashville and Middle Tennessee got hit really hard, right? We had National Guard support. Was anybody talking about martial law? No. Was it? Technically, yes. If they're calling out the National Guard to assist, sure it is. But nobody's talking about that. We're all helping each other. So again, I think there's so much hype on social media. And again, everybody right now is sitting at home, you know, looking at a smartphone or a computer or a TV, right? There's nothing else to do. So the problem is this is just getting hyped more and more and more hyped, right?
Exactly.
Is there anything to it? Is there anything to worry about? Absolutely not. I think if anything else, you see your National Guardsmen out, give them a bottle of water and tell them thanks for helping or whatever, right? Do it from 6 feet away, though. Wipe it down with Lysol and throw it to them.
Exactly. You know? If you can get a hold of Lysol right now, you know, not only are I mentioned the 2 ships coming in, you know, that are Navy, you know, those are military, but they're there for aid. They're not there to take over. They're there to support. We've seen curfews right now in some places, closings of restaurants to be martial law. But if our government's not at an angle to form a dictatorship and take over. You know, it's literally just to stop the spread of the virus. And that's what people have to stop and realize at that time, just like you said, and the Supreme Court has said, it's not to, some of your civil liberties may be temporarily put on hold for the good of the whole. And that's what we have to, I think, realize and get back to that moderation side of that.
Yeah, and it's gonna take everybody that you know. I mean, a lot of people. I saw a meme. I think it was on LinkedIn that said, "Introverts, please advise us extroverts are about to go insane." You know, they don't know what to do because they're stuck at home. So I think it's a combination of a couple of issues that this we're going to have. Number one, people are stuck, right? And so their sense of cabin fever is through the roof, right? And I get that. I'm thankful that, you know, I get to work from home, and my family, my wife's a homebody, my kids are homebodies. You know, we live in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't really affect us. I mean, but some people, if you're living on top of each other, apartment buildings, condos, you know, what we call the French fry houses all popping up all over Nashville, you know, they're tall and skinnies right next to each other. You know, people are going to want to get out, right? And I get that, and that's okay to some degree if you do the things you're supposed to do and practice social distancing. But the other ones that I'm actually, I don't want to say concerned about, but the ones that we really need to keep in check or fine-tuned are the ones that just want to go push the envelope just to push the envelope, right? They just want to violate the order just to see what happens, right? A social experiment, if you will, whatever, so they can post it on their social media. Please don't. Good God, for the love of God, give us a few more weeks, right? Let's get this thing knocked out and we can get back to life as normal. But those of y'all that are out pushing the envelope and doing things you're not supposed to do, that does not help anyone. I don't care how insane you're going. Wait till 2 a.m. and go for a walk if you have to, but just don't push the envelope. That's not what we need right now. We need to band together and get this thing knocked out.
Absolutely. It's the panic and the hysteria, you know, comes from, you know, an idle mind and sitting at home and just filling it with ideas. And it's so easy to do with 24/7 news coverage, with, you know, everything that's available online. I still say you have to go back to the moderation standpoint. But Brink, let's throw out there, what if true, what if we got to martial law? What are some tips that we can give, people that to help survive that? Not survive. I mean, they're not coming to kill us. That's not what I'm saying. But how do you, some things to combat it? Do you want to be, if a protest is going on, for everybody to, express their feelings to the government of, you're not taking me? And is it a time to go prove a point and get out in a crowd on the street right now and let them know just how Billy badass you are, or how do we do that?
Pick up the phone or email them. Don't get out in a group and protest, right? That's the worst thing you can do is get people together right now, right? No matter what. I don't care how pissed off you are or what. Hell, make a video, right? Or do a Zoom call, right? Like we're doing. I mean, do something else. Send, get out your smartphone, make a video and post it on Facebook, or send it to your legislator or your governor or whoever. But if we ever got to that point, again, it would be at a state level. It would not be at a federal level. There's specific restrictions in the law that don't allow the martial law. So again, this is from that same article from heritage.org, but it says Congress has placed significant constraints on the domestic use of the U.S. military. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 generally prohibits the use of armed forces for performing domestic law enforcement activities. So, lawmakers have been they've enacted important exceptions that allow the use in certain specified circumstances of the military to enforce federal laws. The Insurrection Act, but that's dating back to 1807. If you got a domestic rebellion, right, stuff like that, man. So again, we're just not there. The orders that are in place, and they're going to continue to come from different areas that are hit hard by this thing, whether they be governors or mayors or whatever else. Please just follow the order. I know you don't want to. Most of us don't like having our liberty restricted. Obviously some things you can do to avoid people are, number one, don't go out unless you have to. Number two, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your groceries delivered by Whole Foods just because you're a Prime member, right? Most grocery stores now are providing delivery. Instacart is a app. You can get your groceries delivered. You can go get takeout food, go for a walk in the park, whatever, but just avoid people and groups, and just again, do this thing. Don't freak out. Nobody's going to come, raid your house and take your crap away. Just do what you have to do to get the rest of us past this, right?
Yeah, and it's, this is a different time than we've normally experienced, because in the past we've had disasters that everybody has to pull together. You think of Katrina, that was a specific area, a specific region. Everybody had to bind together. You have isolated incidents, where Nashville strong. Let's be there. Right now, everyone has to remember that everybody from coast to coast, north to south, is in the same boat. And our healthcare workers that are out there right now, breaks your heart when they're leaving their families and literally can't go back and see them because of the fear of contamination. Yep. Be as courteous to those people. These restaurants that they're floors are closed right now. Nobody can come in and eat. So it's cut down on them, but they're staying open. They're providing a service. Tip those guys. Be polite to the law enforcement. Everybody's in it together. No one's out to try and get anybody. And in a time of hysteria, that's what we start fearing. And we start, it's that, flight or fight takes over of the individual that you always speak of. And that's not what we're in. We're all on the same team trying to get through this.
Well, I think what makes this one so unique, though, like you said, is we all, in times of disaster, we all band together, and that's in our nature as Americans, right? But we can't band together. We have to do the opposite in this instance, and that's stay apart, which is very difficult. Where do you draw strength? From your brother, from your friend, right? From each other. That's where a lot of people draw their strength, and now we're separated. So how are we doing that? I mean, obviously social media and things like we're doing right here are helpful, but I do want to hit on what you said real quick as we wrap up. our healthcare workers, our doctors. I've seen picture after picture on social media of nurses and doctors with bruising on their face from wearing the PPE for so long. It's crazy, but they are extremely dedicated, right? And they are on the front lines fighting this thing. Our truckers, our farmers, our food producers, our grocers, the people that can't not go to work because they have to provide stuff for us. Hats off to you all. Holy smokes. The law enforcement, military, government people, everybody that has to stay at work and is continuing to support this thing. We support you. Hats off to you. And I hope that everybody out there will do the same thing. On that note, thank you all for listening to this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow. By all means, you can find us at tipstacticstools.com or Facebook or Twitter and reach out to us. Thanks for listening.
I'm out.